Right, so the allegation, the very idea that, well, if you were innocent, you wouldn't have to worry about anything, is ridiculous. When we live in a world where people are put in prison every day for confessing to crimes that they didn't commit, or for being framed by other people who did commit the crime, fucking the most known child murder case in America was a false conviction. Otis Toole. He confessed to murdering Adam Walsh, but none of the evidence led to it, and he even recanted multiple times. But you know, the detectives, they wanted to find anybody, they wanted to convict anybody, and he walked in and said he did it, so they spoon-fed him the information that he needed to convict himself. Not that Otis Toole was a good person, but he didn't kill Adam Walsh, and that's what he died in prison for. There's another man recently I was watching on Dateline. He spent 14 years in prison for a false confession. 14 years for a crime that he didn't really even know anything about. The police gave him the information that he knew. And, like, okay, here's what happened. Actually, the man across the street from the girl raped and murdered her. And they pulled in this other guy, and they offered him a deal. If he would confess, they would let him go. So he made up a confession. And of course that didn't fit the evidence, so they said, well, that doesn't fit the evidence we have, so your deal is off. But what we're going to do is we're going to refresh your memory a little bit. Let you try again. Here's what we know happened. Okay, now if you confess, we'll give you a deal. 20 hours this man was interrogated, given deal after deal after deal, given new information after each deal. By the time it was over with, his confession involved 2 other men, one who would go to jail and one who would never be tried. And none of those 3 were ever involved to begin with. The first guy had been interrogated for over 20 hours and just kept confessing and making up stories and telling the police what they fucking wanted to hear, because that's what you do after hours and hours and hours of investigative torture. That's what you guys put me through. Y'all put me through hours and hours and hours of asking me the same question over and over and over again and not accepting my answer. Every time I told you the answer, you would tell me that I was lying or that I was not remembering it correctly, and you kept telling me that if I would just confess, it would all go away. If I would just confess, and everything ends. Everything goes away. Every morning I woke up to people demanding that I confess. Not just through the comments, but through emails and through phone calls. I was getting phone calls at like 2 in the morning demanding that I confess, that I just stop pretending and confess already. And they harassed me to the point that they got me into mental breakdowns, and then my words would get twisted up, and they would twist those further and say, see, this proves this part, so this is enough for a confession. We've proved it. But then they didn't prove anything. They just got me upset and then twisted my words around. But they kept saying, it's proved. All you have to do now is just admit it, just confess to it, and everything will end. Over and over and over again. For 1.5 years they did this to me. Adonis Paul and Virgie is banned on YouTube. Like, The things that he was doing, YouTube actually looked into and said, no, we do not want you on this platform. But he's still on the platform because he goes on Adonis Paul's show. There was a woman on... sorry. There was a woman on Dr. Phil I was watching the other day that did exactly this kind of stuff. She called Dr. Phil and she said that she had medical proof, evidence that her daughter was being sexually molested. And then she showed up and she didn't have any of that proof at all. She showed medical records where the doctor literally stated nothing was found and the mother was being overdramatic or lying. And she was called out on it. Dr. Phil's like, look, you called us up here. You said you had proof. You had documents proving what you were claiming, and none of these documents prove anything. And her response is, well, we thought once you met him, you would understand and could read through the lines. That's not what proof is. And that's what Adonis Paul and Virgie G and Daywave have done to me. They've taken the proof and said, but if you know her, then you know what really happened, and it was this. If you know her after the murder, if you know her after she's been traumatized, if you've dealt with her after hours and hours of torturous harassment to get her to break down, you would understand that she's actually a murderer that needs to be punished. It's not, that proof would not hold up in any court of law. And they pushed me to the point that multiple times I have been tempted to walk into a police station and actually confess to a crime that I did not commit, but I know all the details of because I was a witness to it. How fucked would that have been? A witness confessing to a crime that they didn't commit, but they know all the details for obvious reasons. And that's another thing. They say, well, if you didn't do it, then how do you know all these details? Because I was there. It's called being a witness. When thousands of people for a year and a half are demanding that a witness and a victim confess to the crime that traumatized them or be traumatized again. The fact that I have to explain how fucked up that is shows how fucked up it is. And what they did should be illegal. Because there's reasons that they use specially trained people to interrogate. The reason is because the human mind is fragile. And it is easy, under extreme duress and threats, and it's easy to twist up a person's mind and even make them believe that they've committed a crime that they haven't committed. Or force them to confess to something that they have no idea what they're even confessing to, just because they want to be free from the hell that the interrogation has been. They're supposed to be specially trained so that the interrogations don't turn into torture sessions just to get the response that they want. The men who have been interrogating me and demanding that I confess or it never ends, they're not police officers and they were never trained to do these interrogations. They're just using their intimidation to mentally torment the witness to a crime. And something should be done about it. And the fact that they've walked away doesn't mean that it's done for me, because I still live with this fear that they're going to come back. It's probably never going to be over for me. It's a part of my trauma now. And something should be done to make sure that they don't go on to traumatize other victims. Just because they don't understand what the person's gone through. And they think it's funny to mess with a mind that they are stronger than, that they can control and manipulate for their amusement.